I may have come close to meeting a serial killer once. So, to preface this story, I grew up just south of Seattle under the shadow of the Green River Killer. We lived just outside the city, but not quite to the suburbs, almost like living in a small town, except that we weren't far from either the killer's pickup or dump spots. My brothers and I had to take our dogs with us everywhere we went. Other than that, we enjoyed a pretty amazing amount of freedom, even for the late 70s and early 80s. I was a total tomboy, climbing trees and playing in the mud and running in the woods. I was fairly fearless. Fast forward to 87, I'm living just off Pack Highway with my dad and busing to school on the metro every day. I have to walk up a huge steep hill to catch the bus down Pack Highway, walk back down the hill into the neighborhoods, cross the middle school and the athletic fields, then back again the other way at the end of the day. I did this voluntarily to attend the nicer school with the gifted program. I'd also just started experimenting with being a girl, but I wasn't very good at it yet, so not very aware of the things girls have to pay attention to, like personal safety and situational awareness. This is important as to why I felt so comfortable busing along Pack Highway alone at 14, and also why I made the tactical error that I made. So, spring of freshman year, there's a Friday night dance and I wanted to go. Dad drops me off and says, I'll be back at whatever time, 2 hours or something. For some stupid teenage reason, after being there a bit, I decided I wanted to go home. Of course, normal folks didn't have cell phones back then, and there was no payphone, and I was used to getting myself around. So I take off across the fields, through the neighborhoods and up to the bus stop at Pack Highway, and everything is fine for a minute. Then this kind of shortish guy gets out of his pale pickup that's parked in the lot next to the bus stop. He walks towards me, and he doesn't say a word. He just stares at me. I come to a couple realizations fairly quickly. Number one, it's neither early morning or early afternoon when I usually bus. Number two, I'm not wearing my standard jeans paired with my dad's work shirt I typically wear. I am, in fact, wearing a miniskirt with a face full of, quote, sexy makeup. Well, really it was tacky and overdone, and I was still trying to learn to be girly, but I didn't know that then. I also had a shirt on that actually showed my recently grown, way too large, way too soon breasts. Number three, I'm on Pack Highway, late at night, in a hooker-dense area, all alone and there's virtually no one around. It's almost closed business on this little stretch of highway. Number four, this guy is wrong. He's just wrong. I don't know why, at that point in my life, but every cell in my body is screaming that this guy is wrong. So, I nope the fuck out of there. But I make a serious tactical error and head back to the high school instead of just down to the grocery store at the corner and up the street a bit. And he follows me. He's about 200 yards off my ass as I drop down into the neighborhoods. It's dark and it's quiet, and it seems to me at least that there's almost no one home. There were very few lights on, very few cars in the driveways, and he wasn't making a single sound. He's just staring at me and he just keeps coming. I have noped the fuck out in exactly the wrong direction. Thank the fashion gods of the late 80s that Converse high-top tennis shoes were quote in, even with miniskirts, because I'm power walking by the time I can see the middle school, and now he's only about 100 feet off my ass. And even though I'm 14 and I walk up and down hills every day, I'm huffing and gasping for air, and he's still totally silent, and still staring, and he just keeps coming. That's when I realized how fucked I am. Because as dark as the neighborhood feels, the middle school and the athletic fields are pitch black, and there's now literally no one between me and the high school parking lot where teachers and students are at, up another hill. It's the athletic fields for two schools, and it's so dark. I flat out start running across the fields, and he's catching up to me. When I break out into the parking lot, he's only about 10 feet behind me, and the first thing I see is Dad. Never so glad to see anyone in my life. He was waiting in his car because somehow this whole ordeal had taken enough time for him to be there. The creeper peels off and melts back into the dark of the athletic field. Dad didn't see him well enough to get a detailed description, but did see the dude appear behind me as I ran like my ass was on fire out of the dark. Dad actually got out of the car and started towards him, but still without having made a single sound, the guy was just gone. Dad kept the chewing out to a minimum, as he could tell I was pretty shaken. But there was some unpleasant realization about young women with large breasts, and personal safety explained to me that night. I got a lot better about situational awareness real fast. Fast forward several more years, and they catch Gary Ridgway, the notorious Green River Killer. It turns out that he worked with my stepdad. This sicko used to leave his victims' jewelry in the female employee's restroom, and the women that went in would, quote, find it, and, after ascertaining no one else claimed it, would wear it. Stepdad remembers this happening often. Now, it's been years. That night was dark and I was scared, but Ridgway fits the general height, build, description, and vehicle as the creeper from that night in '87. A couple of his victims disappeared during that general time frame from Pack Highway, within a mile of that bus stop. I'm not sure if I outran him due to my hill walking stamina, if he was just playing, or if he realized I was a high school student and not a prostitute, or what. But man, I've never felt anyone quite as wrong as that dude felt. No way to know if that was even Ridgway or some rando creeper, but it's entirely possible I came damn close to being a victim. A friend and I went to Atlantic City in the early 2000s, and we had a great time. But on the way back to my friend's shore house, we got lost. My BlackBerry had spotty service at the time, and we were lost somewhere in New Jersey. We stopped at a restaurant and decided to try and get directions. The restaurant was the only one around for miles, and on a Friday night, we were the only ones there. We ordered water, and the waiter brought us Coke. Our waiter was super creepy, and after eating, another waiter brought us the bill, which we didn't even think about at the time. While we were leaving in the parking lot, I noticed someone smoking in the car next to me. Our waiter was sitting in a car watching us and smoking. My friend and I looked at each other and got in the car as fast as possible. I pulled out slowly and noticed that he pulled out too. He followed us back to my friend's shore house over 40 miles away. We freaked out the entire time, debating on whether or not to go to the house or just keep driving. I only had about 20 more miles of gas left, and we had less than half the drive, so we were debating getting gas, but every gas station we passed was empty. We didn't want to take the chance. It was scary. There was no one at my friend's house, and we had a terrible feeling the entire time he was serving us. We drove to another street hoping to lose him. We parked in a random driveway, and as we parked, he pulled up beside us. We backed up full speed and drove to the local police station that was down another kind of sketchy street. He followed us and just drove past the police station as we pulled in. We reported it, but with a vague idea of who he was. We didn't know his license plate number at all. There was nothing that could really be done. We still talk about this even though it happened almost 20 years ago. Two girls together can be in danger, even though you feel safe. I'm very cautious now. I've read too many true crime books. I'm never alone at night. I'm never alone in a park when no one is there. I make sure to have Life 360 running on my phone, and I make sure to let people know when I go somewhere. Stay safe. When I was younger, probably about 5 or 6, my mom and I were driving home from a larger city about 4 hours away from ours. It was a long drive, and it started out with very windy, curvy roads. It could be more than a little nerve-wracking to drive. I remember I saw my mom getting tense. I felt scared because I knew she wasn't calm. Her eyes kept flicking to the rear view mirror and back to the road. There was a car following us closely, way too close on a 75-mile-per-hour road. Whenever we would switch a lane, so would they. Whenever we slowed down, so would they. Basically anything my mom did, they copied. My mom was in full-on panic mode, didn't know what to do. So she went to pull over on an exit after about 20 minutes of the other car following us so recklessly. Of course, the car followed. She pulled off on the side of the road, and the car parked a little ways behind us. It just so happens that another car was taking the same exit, and the car that had been following us quickly drove away and merged back on the freeway. The car that had just exited pulled up, and a family was inside. They asked if we were okay. They'd seen the other car following us, and knew something wasn't right. I hate to think what would have happened if the other car hadn't pulled off. Whoever that family was, I'm pretty sure they saved my mom and I. When this occurred, I had been staying with my mother in an apartment while I was attending graduate school. Half of my classes were online, and live classes were at night, so my sleep schedule was atypical. I'd often be sleeping during the day and awake at night. This particular night, I had waken up around midnight, and maybe an hour later felt hungry, so I left for a nearby Jack in the Box, as they have a 24-hour drive-thru. As I'm walking toward the row of cars in front of my place where I was parked, which was probably 15 to 20 feet from my front door, I remember something. My mom had been nagging me recently to take her car if I was leaving somewhere at night. Her reasoning was that her car was safer and more reliable. Mine was older and shittier, but still not dangerous to drive. My mom's a bit paranoid about her children's safety and health, but I appreciate it despite the constant nagging, because I know she means well. About a foot away from my car, where I can clearly remember seeing my driver door being closed, I decided to follow her request and take her car. And FYI, there was a car parked between mine and hers. So I drove to Jack in the Box, got my food, and returned home. I'm only gone 6 or 7 minutes, tops. As I'm walking away from my mom's car, I happen to glance over to mine and notice the driver door is ajar. Strange. Like I said, I distinctly remember it being closed right before I left. I walk over and notice that the door isn't just ajar, but actually open about an inch and unlocked. I open the door and look inside to find my entire CD player / radio half ripped out. Whoever did it had been using something sharp, probably a screwdriver or a knife, to pry it open. I was a bit spooked, but I wasn't that freaked out yet, and not wanting to deal with it right then since it was 1 a.m., just closed the door and locked it. It was when I went inside the apartment where it hit me. The person who did it was inside my car when I came out to drive to get food. That's why the thief didn't finish the job and left the CD player, and I remember the driver door being closed, which means just as I drove away in my mom's car, they got out of mine and took off. It was my mom's request to take her car instead of mine that most likely prevented me from catching someone in the process of robbing me. Remember, I was only a foot away from my car when I decided to give in to her paranoid concerns. I can even remember my thought process at the moment. Oh right, she said to take her car. Ugh, fine. I'll listen to her this time. Thanks, Mom. Because of your paranoia and nagging, you probably saved me from getting stabbed. I was followed home from work when I was 16. A guy was loitering outside of my work for a couple of hours. He freaked me out even then. I had never seen him before that night. He was still there when I left to walk home around 9 p.m. Home was just across the street and the equivalent of a block away. I worked in a Subway, the sandwich shop, that was in a strip mall shopping center, and I lived in condos that were basically across the street from the backside of those shops. I had to walk by him as I left the store, and I kept telling myself to just be calm because, come on, why would he follow me? Well, as I walked, so did he. Then I crossed the street, and he did not, so I gave a sigh of relief. But we kept walking the same direction, and I looked again, and he was now crossing the street too. I freaked, in my mind, that is. I started to walk faster, and instead of taking the walkway, I basically booked it, walking fast, not running, and not looking back. I took off over the grass toward my building. It was one of those complexes with multiple buildings, and each building had several open doorways, and those doorways had 2 bottom units and 2 top units. My building, thank God, was on the street, so luckily, all I had to do was get around the building on the street to get to my doorway. I got to the open doorway, ran up the stairs, and looked down as I grabbed the screen door. The guy was at the bottom of the stairs, and just looking up at me. When he saw that I was actually at my unit and not just hiding, he booked it out of there super fast. So yeah, I really was followed home by a super creepy guy. It wasn't my imagination. He actually was stalking me that night. I'm positive if I had walked further into the complex, I'd be dead right now. He never came back to the subway or our complex. Thank God I was paying attention. I'm positive that not panicking saved my life. Not letting him know I knew that he was following and not running. He thought he had plenty of time to grab me. This was back in 1994, so no cell phones either. My younger brother and I were almost abducted when we were kids by a criminally insane man who raped and then murdered his own mother by burning her alive in her own home to hide the evidence. He spent 20 years in a psychiatric institution before being released. This man lived only a few blocks away from the home my family lived in at the time. I was 6 and my brother was 4. He and I were playing outside in the front yard one afternoon when this man approached the end of our driveway and tried to lure us both over to him. I stayed away, but my brother, being naive and not really knowing any better, ran over to him. I started panicking because I realized how dangerous this was, but my brother wouldn't listen to me. The man started asking us our names and asking my brother if he could recite his ABCs. Eventually, this man begins to try talking us into walking over to his house with him, which I recall was decrepit and hardly inhabitable. In a last-ditch effort to prevent whatever was about to ensue, I had run to my little brother and latched on tightly to his hand in order to pull him back and away from this man. But the man was trying relentlessly to pull us both away from our home. Being only 6 years old and extra petite for my age, I was losing, and I was terrified. By sheer luck, my father had walked into the kitchen and happened to glance out of the kitchen window as this was happening, and managed to intervene. He scared the man off and threatened to kill him if he ever saw him anywhere near his kids or anyone else's kids ever again. I never saw him in the neighborhood again, needless to say. But my little brother certainly got the stranger danger talk, and we were both kept on a tight leash from that point on. It's insane to think about how differently this could have played out, and it's one of the closest calls I'll probably ever have in my life. Total nightmare fuel. This happened to me when I was around 17 or 18 and had just graduated high school and had moved to the city to study. I lived in a share house with 4 people, and one of them was a 40-year-old guy. He was super fucking seedy, and used to keep boxes of cheap red wine in his bedroom, start drinking at 4 p.m. every day, and cry a lot. He was a really weird guy with really severe depression, and he made a lot of drama for the other housemates. As a result, the 2 friends that were sharing the large bedroom gave notice, and he took it really personally. He decided for whatever reason that, quote, justice would be to steal their camera and iPod Touch. Like I said, total nutcase. So, later that night, he got drunk as usual and was crying in the living room. I came out of my room and asked what was wrong, and he told me what he had done. So naturally, I rang the landlord the first thing the next morning to report their stuff, and he got evicted. This resulted in him absolutely losing his shit. I said that I'd stay with a friend that night, so he could move without it being awkward. I came home to my TV broken, all our crockery smashed, and a sign that had been put under my door saying "cunt" in big red letters. He also tried to kill himself. Fast forward to about a month later, and I go to the local corner store to get some food at around 9 p.m. As I walk in the door, he's at the counter waiting to buy his goods. I walked straight past him without looking at him, and waited a good 10 minutes after seeing him before leaving the store myself to make sure he was definitely gone. The fucker was waiting for me outside, and as I started walking home, he started following me. I rang my mom and just started yelling, "Mom, call the police! I'm being followed! Call the police! Call the police!" And I told her exactly who was following me, all loud enough for him to hear. My poor mom was already terrified of me moving into the city, and she rang the police while I sprinted home. Our house was only 3 back from the corner, and I looked out the window and just saw him standing under a streetlight staring at me. It still makes me shudder to think about it. This is the kind of shit that you read about in horror news articles. To make matters worse, it was night when all 4 of my other housemates were out of the house, so I was totally alone. I went down to the police station not long after and made a police report. They had this weirdo on file already, and I identified him as the one who followed me. The policewoman who did my report said that she couldn't tell me what he had done, but that his history was very bad. So yeah, I have no idea if he just wanted to scare me, or if he actually intended on hurting me. But given his history on mental health and alcoholism, I hate to think what could have happened. When I was 7 or so, a neighborhood kid, he was more like 13 or 14 and was more of a friend of my brother's than me, lured me to his house after school. His mom got home a couple hours after school let out, so I had hung out over there with my brother a few times, so I wasn't that scared. He was a weird kid who once had a blast putting his cat into a paper bag and swinging it hard at the couch. Anyway, I get to his house and straight away he takes me to his bedroom and tells me to stand in the corner and pull my pants down. During that time of my life, I was being molested by a relative, so I felt this situation was odd, but maybe it wasn't. So I did as he said. I didn't expect him to start throwing haymakers at my privates, though. He was just laughing and getting some kind of gratification from causing me pain. I don't remember all what he did, but it lasted until his mom got home. When his mom rolled into the garage, you could hear it throughout the house. He heard it and went white as a ghost, and I used that moment to push past him and flee. I passed his mom on the way out of the house, and she had the most confused look on her face. I didn't stop walking, but I told her he kept hitting me in the nuts. I could hear her yelling at him for answers across the street. They moved shortly after, and I heard that he died in a car wreck. I don't know if that's true, though. If he didn't, I'm positive he's either killed or continued to molest and torture others. My brother told me back then that he had tortured and killed a few cats, but I thought it was just gossip. Now I think he was a psychopath that I'm thankful to have only had a close call with. I was living in San Francisco in 1980. I was fairly new to the area and was always looking for stuff to do on the weekends. I found there was roller skating on Sundays at Golden Gate Park, so I went most every Sunday. It was really fun. At one section of the park there was a group of people who were juggling, and I made friends with one guy and he taught me how to juggle a bit. I ended up going home with him one night. We had some fun and he fell asleep. Except I needed a ride home because I was going to work early and I needed to have time to get ready. He said he'd take me home later though. But there was no later. When I woke him up at 2 a.m., he flat out said he wouldn't take me home, and I could just take the bus. So I walked over to where the North Judas Street car was coming in, and I took it close to my mom's house where I was living. It dropped me off 3 blocks from Golden Gate Park on my street. Shortly after, I began the 4-block walk home. I noticed that a man was following me. I didn't immediately get freaked out though. He could have just been someone else on their way home. But this was not the case. I thought he had found his destination, as he wasn't behind me any longer. But at the next block, there he was, hiding behind the side of an apartment building. I gave him a scolding look and continued, but he began to follow me again. Now I was freaked. He definitely had bad intentions. I thought my dead body would be found in a month or two by someone's dog, with an apple shoved up my ass. I don't even know why I thought that, but San Francisco being San Francisco, it probably wasn't too far off the mark. He started walking faster, trying to catch up to me. Now I was panicking, and my only hope was to get help. Of course, there were no cell phones or phone booths in the strictly residential neighborhood. I picked a house at random and ran up their stairs and began pounding on their door and ringing their bell. No one answered the door, but I figure a light went on upstairs because the freak ran off. And so did I. I took off with 1.5 blocks left to safety. I was running across the last cross street, and the car came barreling down way above the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. Holy crap, I thought. That's how he got ahead of me. He got in his car and drove around the block to intercept me. This guy is experienced and had a plan. I don't know if I ever ran faster in my life, but in any case, I was going as fast as I could. I made it to my mom's little house and got the key in the lock with my shaky hand, slammed the door, and took a big breath. I made it. Needless to say, I hope I never again traveled in the city in the wee hours of the morning by myself ever again. Oh, and I never went to the juggler's place again. What a jerk. London, 1996-ish. When I was 14 or so, my friends and I were a bit rebellious and used to sneak out of our houses in the middle of the night to hang out while we were off of school for the summer. One such night, I was walking alone down a suburban street near my home at about 2 a.m. when a white BMW turned into the street, moving towards me. As the car approached me, it started to slow down. I wasn't a fan of that, so I quickly crossed the road to get a bit of distance between us. The car immediately sped up again. I didn't really think anything of it until I saw the driver's face. He was glaring at me as he passed with a look of pure rage. It creeped me out. It was a quiet night, and I heard this BMW reach the other end of the short street. There's a bus garage there, and plenty of room for a car to turn around, which is exactly what this guy did. The road also has one side street running off of it, and I bolted down there the moment I realized the car had turned around and was coming back towards me. There were plenty of cars parked on the side street, and I stood behind a van that was large enough to hide me from the road. Sure enough, I heard a car turn onto the side street as well, and when I peeked around the side of the van, it was the same white BMW, moving very slowly. I caught a glimpse of the guy's eyes unmistakably scanning the street, searching. That side street is an inverted P shape. The car turned and made its way down one arm of the P. I knew going back to the original road would expose me too much, and I could tell this guy was going to keep on searching until he was satisfied. A quick look around me revealed a graveled driveway between two houses. These are common in suburban London, and generally lead to people's backyards or garages, so I guessed I'd be able to find a decent hiding place, even if it meant scaling fences in my ridiculously unsuitable heeled sandals. I sprinted down there as best as I could in those shoes, all the while hearing the low rumble of the BMW inching its way around the top of the P. At the end of the driveway were two small lock-up garages. Only one was locked. The other wasn't, so I creaked the very stiff door open just enough to crawl in and pull it so I was hidden. There was a big tarp in there, so just for some extra security I crawled underneath, although the crackling sound it made sounded as loud as gunfire to my scared ears. I crouched there for what felt like eternity as the car rumbled up and down the distance. I remember wondering why on earth the driver hadn't assumed that I lived here and had entered one of the houses already, but I wasn't going anywhere until I heard him drive off. Then, to my absolute horror, I heard the engine getting louder, and then a car door slammed. As the car idled at the end of the driveway, footsteps sounded on the gravel. I freaked out, wondering how the hell he knew I was there. Later I realized that he had simply spotted a potential hiding place he hadn't checked yet. The footsteps got closer and closer until they stopped right outside the garages. Luckily, I'd managed to shut the door behind me so it didn't look suspicious, but at this point, I was terrified that I would shake so much that I rustled the tarp and gave myself away. It seemed like hours, but was probably only a few minutes before the guy just gave up, walked back to his car and drove off. I waited as long as I could bear before getting out of there, just in case. I don't know how long, but it was after 5 a.m. when I got to my house, just about 5 minutes away. I often wonder what could have happened that night. I was still 3 or 4 years away from getting my first phone, which might have made things go very differently. Last year, I was out celebrating my birthday with some friends. About 2 drinks in, for whatever reason, I went from completely enjoying the night to not a single memory at all. Total blackout. A friend of mine said that he had to carry me out of the bar, and that at one point when we pulled over, I vomited more than he's ever seen anyone vomit before. The next day, we figured that I must have been drugged, that maybe I was just an unlucky target, or it was just a random happening. Cut to a few days later, and I'm still feeling a bit crappy, but things are starting to come around. I'm reading through the news, and apparently a guy the same night was reported missing from that very bar that I was at. I called the police, and instantly they told me that there had been several reports of people being drugged, and that the FBI would be contacting me soon. I went through an interview process and sent them photos of myself and my friends so that they could try and figure out when I was drugged and who actually did it. Needless to say, they never figured out who actually did the drugging, never got a clear picture from the video cameras of the bar or what had happened at all. When I asked why the FBI was involved, they said that there was a possible connection between this murder and 40 other murders that had happened across the Midwest over the last 20 years. After all that went down, they later found a guy's body in a nearby river. The creepiest part is that through the autopsy, they were able to discern that he was dead before he got thrown into the water, and there was no water actually found in his lungs. The killer was never found, and the whole night still remains a mystery. This happened to me last week. I live in a very large city in a very safe country. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on a flat rooftop, meaning that the roof wraps around the entirety of my little square of an apartment. The roof is accessible through a door that I keep locked at all times, but then my apartment itself also has a separate glass sliding door. The rooftop doesn't touch any other buildings, but on the back end there's another rooftop that's just a flat, bare square. It's about 1.5 meters below and half a meter across from my apartment. On Tuesday night around 11:30 p.m., I have my front door open and all my windows too as it's summer and hot. I'm doing some things while loudly listening to some videos on my laptop. I eventually decide to take a quick rinse in the shower before I go to bed for the night. When I step out of the bathroom, I immediately know that there's someone standing behind the foggy, speckled glass of my sliding door. I don't say or do anything, but I can see the shape of a person, and they're bringing one of their arms down. Suddenly, complete silence dawns as the YouTube video that had been drowning in the background comes to an end. Like a clueless weirdo, I say, "Hello?" Yes, hello, to the intruder hiding behind my door. As soon as I spoke, the figure lunged out from behind the door and into my apartment. He's youngish, in his mid-20s like I am. I scream, louder than I ever have, and he kind of just stops. He turns on his heel and sprints out, towards the back of the roof, not towards the street access locked door. I lock everything. I call the police, they come. The street access door was of course still locked. The only way this guy could have gotten up here is by scaling walls, gates, stairs, buildings, up 4 floors, to finally get to my roof. Who the fuck does that? What does a person want who is willing to put their life on the line? He could have very easily have fallen down at any point. Has he been peeping on me without my knowledge? Watching the apartment? How did he even figure out how to get up there? I am someone's creepy close call story. A few years ago, I got a new job in downtown Denver. I had never really spent any time downtown, definitely not at night. Since my office was a few blocks down from the baseball stadium, my work had a yearly company baseball game. So we had a lovely night, with lots of drinking. As our team sucked, we weren't winning, and slowly most of my coworkers had left early. I too decided to leave early and walk to the bus station, because I didn't want to get stuck in the rush when the game ended. But since I was drunk, I got turned around, even though it was just 3.5 blocks away. I ended up taking not the street my office is on, and all the crowded bars, but the next street over, which at the time was full of unoccupied buildings waiting to be torn down and rebuilt. I was completely alone in this darkened street, except for a cute 20-something couple making out and slowly walking in the same direction I was going in. Drunk me started freaking out, and so I decided to walk behind the cute PDA couple. As we walked, they turned and saw me, a short, lumbering drunk woman following them closely. I apparently started to freak them out, so they started walking faster. So, for some reason, I started walking faster too. When they crossed the street, I crossed to follow them. In my drunken state, I was thinking, safety in numbers. I didn't realize I was the one being weird. It's not a long walk, but after a few blocks of me awkwardly following them, the dude just yells, "Run!" and he runs across the street in a zigzag motion. The girl panics and doesn't run, frozen in place, so he has to come back for her. At the same time, we were right in front of the bus station building, and I turn away from them and go inside the building. This all unfolded in the same moment. In the corner of my eye, I see them staring at me, realizing I wasn't actually following them, but kind of was. They then sheepishly walk away, no longer running now that they know they weren't being followed. I feel so bad for freaking them out.